Good evening, Monday 19th of August, Anno Domini 2024. Harnwell here at the helm. We've got a very packed hour ahead of you today, so we're going to cut straight into it. First up is the Secretary of State in Ohio, Frank Larose. Secretary of State, good afternoon to you. There's been some substantial accusations, but reading through this, it seems to be a political hit job against you. But accusations that you're involved with gerrymandering and that you have abandoned your obligation to be impartial by this new group parading itself as citizens, not politicians. Now, obviously, they're presenting themselves as bipartisan, disinterested citizens. But when you dig a little deeper, it looks as if these attacks against you is a pretty concerted political effort. Secretary of State, good afternoon to you. Would you like to explain a little bit more about precisely what's going on in Ohio right now?
Yeah, good afternoon, Ben. Well, as it turns out, the voters of Ohio for now several years, by large majorities, have been putting Republicans in charge of things. And what that means is that Republicans have held the majority on the redistricting commission that's existed in Ohio for many, many decades, that draws the district lines. By the way, when we passed district lines in this last decennial redistricting process, they got unanimous bipartisan support and were upheld, of course, by the courts as well. But again, that's not good enough for these leftists that want to take control of the process. So they have circulated a petition to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot in Ohio, and they want to change the process to put what they call a citizen commission together. You all know how this works, though. What it ends up being is a bunch of unaccountable individuals, and in many cases leftists, that want to try to rig the maps to favor Democrats. Now, one of my responsibilities as the Ohio Secretary of State is to draft the ballot language. And it's not so much that I have to be impartial, it's that I have to be truthful. I upheld my oath on Friday, along with our ballot board, when we voted on truthful language that tells the voters what is in this 13,000-word amendment, essentially requires the new commission, if it passes, to gerrymander to create a certain number of districts for the Democrats. Again, that's not how this is supposed to work. What we should do is draw competitive districts that keep communities together, that are compact, and then let the voters decide. We just simply are putting accurate language in front of the voters so that they can make their decision. And yes, I used the word gerrymandering in there because the Oxford English Dictionary definition of gerrymandering is when you manipulate political districts to achieve a specific political outcome. And in this case, the political outcome they're looking for is to draw a certain number of Democratic districts, a certain number of Republican districts. And again, I think the voters of Ohio should know that.
Well, Secretary of State, it sounds to me very much like what's going on there in Ohio is pretty identical. And we're going to be digging into this a little later on the show with what's happening with the Georgia election board as well. Seems to me that uniparty Republicans and Democrats are banding together because they simply don't like the fact that people who are motivated by election integrity are starting to rise up the system and represent the valid concerns of a huge number of Americans and voters. Tell me something, sir, because Ohio isn't conventionally considered to be one of the 6 swing votes in this election cycle, but it is pretty crucial nonetheless. I gather you and your team are digging down on trying to do what 3.5 months left, trying to do something about the dirty voter rolls. Tell me what you've uncovered there.
Yeah, so you're right that Ohio is not really considered a swing state. It's a Trump state. Ohioans, blue collar, working class Ohioans want to see that America First policy agenda put into place. And so even people that are maybe lifelong Democrats in, say, the Mahoning Valley area of Ohio or places like Toledo or where I grew up in Akron are now voting Republican. And that's because we've earned it. But it is a state that can still be competitive. And we've got important races for the U.S. Senate. My friend Bernie Moreno is running to defeat a radical leftist named Sherrod Brown. That will perhaps be the race that makes the difference in taking back the Senate majority. And as you heard me talk about, we're going to have a constitutional amendment on the ballot that could change the way Ohio draws district lines, that could have a really detrimental impact for many, many years to come. So here's what we do. We take election integrity very seriously. We check IDs. We actually refer people for prosecution when we catch them breaking the law. And yes, we maintain accurate voter rolls. This is not a newfound interest. I've been in this office now for 5 years. We remove dead voters on a monthly basis. We remove non-citizens. In fact, we just announced recently that another round, we had been able to find over 500 non-citizens and remove them from the voter rolls, and we're going to refer them for prosecution. In fact, we already have referred them to prosecutors so that they can be brought up on charges, because again, a law that's not enforced is not a law. It's a suggestion, and the law is very clear that U.S. elections are only for U.S. citizens.
What's going on here with the Ohio Supreme Court? Is it going to make an intervention in this, or is it still under consideration, or is it an appeal to it yet to be made?
Well, everything ends up being litigated. It seems like these days in elections, the left wants to try to make election law at the courthouse instead of the state house. That's not the right place to do it. And so I anticipate that the language that was written for the constitutional amendment will get challenged. I've got challenges right now in federal courts right now. We've defended successfully Ohio's voter ID laws. By the way, consider the hypocrisy of the Democrats in Chicago right now. It takes an ID to get into the Democratic convention, and there are miles of walls, but they've been telling us that IDs and walls are racist. We know that that's not true. They're simple, smart techniques to protect the integrity of your process. And so, yeah, these could end up in the Supreme Court. We'll fight them, and I'm confident we'll win.
Just to go back to something you said a moment or so ago on the cleaning of the voter rolls, could you just tell me what some of those numbers are looking like so far under your investigations?
Yeah, we've got 8 million registered voters in the state of Ohio. And so the good news is that the incidence of non-citizens, it's a small number. It's hundreds out of that 8 million voter registration list. But we take these seriously. And when we find them, we remove them. It's an unnecessarily complex process, by the way, because the federal government does not cooperate with us as well as they should. This is why Chip Roy's SAVE Act is so important and something that they should pass early next year. But we go through the process. We do the data entry. In the most recent tranche, we were able to remove, like I said, over 500 non-citizens from the voter rolls, but also many tens of thousands of inactive registrations that had just become vacant for the last few years or had moved out of state. Voter list maintenance is like hygiene. You've got to work on it every day. And in Ohio, that's exactly what we do.
And of course, there's huge vested interests all over the place, and not just in Ohio, to ensure, to slow down the process of cleaning up voter rolls. I mean, like I say, there are vested interests that would like to see that process not undertaken. Is there anywhere that the War Room Posse, or Ohioans specifically, might go to learn more about your constitutional amendment or to support what you're doing?
Yeah, right there on our website, voteohio.gov, you can find all the information about the constitutional amendment. Of course, I'm on all the social media platforms, just at Frank Larose. And if you follow us on there, you're going to see what really is an example for other states to follow. And our hope is that other states will follow our lead to make sure that we keep our elections honest and that the voters get to decide, not somebody else.
That's a revolutionary idea. Frank Larose, Secretary of State in the state of Ohio. Thank you very much for coming on the show today, and I look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Well, I think we're going to have some of these themes that Frank Larose was just mentioning. They're going to be sort of rippling on right throughout the show today. We're going to move on now to our next guest, Evan Power, who's the chair of the Florida GOP, to talk about the primaries, which are taking place tomorrow. Evan, good morning. Thanks for coming on the show today. Obviously, I think attention was directed towards Congressman Matt Gaetz because Kevin McCarthy had been trying to have him primary deselected, much like what successfully happened over in Virginia to Congressman Bob Good. But sort of all accounts, talking to you just before we came on the show, that's not going to be the case tomorrow. And you're telling me that Congressman Gaetz is in a very comfortable position as of this moment.
Congressman Gates is a very popular figure in North Florida, and he's going to win in a comfortable margin. And I think people are getting out to vote and to send it back to Washington because they know the good work he's been doing for them in Washington.
Tell me what some of the wider soundings that you've heard are today, running up into the primaries tomorrow, Evan. What are people saying there more generally across these primaries?
People in Florida are excited to get out and vote. They know the disaster that Kamala Harris will be, so they're excited to vote in primaries. If you look at we just passed 1 million voter advantage here in Florida, but in the primaries, our voters are turning out at a much higher rate than ever before. We have a 7% voter advantage in primary turnout. And to put that in context, at this point in the primary, 2 years ago, the Democrats were up 5. 4 years ago, they were up 10. So we're doing extremely well in turning out voters here in Florida.
Well, here's a question that I have to ask you, and it's something that's obviously animating quite strongly the war room posse, and this is the prospect that the voter integrity issue hasn't substantially been dealt with following 2020, and many of the powers who were involved in 2020 are still around and more than capable of trying the same sort of manoeuvres again in 2024. How satisfied are you, sir, that the voter rolls in Florida are clean enough to prevent any evil doing?
I'm really confident in the Florida voter rolls. Our supervisors have done a great job of cleaning up those rolls. If you look at what's happened since 2022, about 700,000 Democrats have become inactive to about 200,000 Republicans, and then we've added to our total. So that's how you get to our million advantage. But there's a lot less people on our voter roll right now, which means that we have a much more secure process here in Florida.
That's great news. Is there anything else you can tell me in the run-up to these primaries tomorrow that you think the war room posse should be alert to and aware of?
Well, we have a lot of primaries out there. Obviously, we want everyone to get out and vote. We have a lot of school board races in Florida. That's been a big battleground. So we need every Republican to go turn out and vote here in Florida for the primary and vote for their Republican team. But we're doing extremely well, and we're excited about the enthusiasm we have. And I think it will carry over into the general election in November.
Great stuff. Tell me something. What's the deadline for voting tomorrow?
7 p.m.
What time do polls close? 7
p.m. tomorrow night.
Okay. What time do polls open?
At 7 a.m. So you get 12 hours of opportunity.
Okay. And where do people go if they want some more information on this? Specific, I guess, in the state of Florida itself.
If you go to florida.gop, you can find out information about the Republican Party. And then if you go to vote.gop, you can find out about your polling place. Okay.
Evan Power, Chairman of Florida GOP, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show today. We'll catch up again with you soon. God bless.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Okay, Cleta Mtchell. Now, you're a lawyer who's been often in the news, often linked to giving informal soundings to President Trump. You've got some good news for us today about the new rules that are being passed by the Georgia Election Board. I think this is pretty much similar to the movements that Frank Larose was just talking about a few moments or so ago in Ohio. But can you tell me this new rule? From what I gather, it's an attempt to insist that the three headline figures of voters' votes and ballots cast all align, which would be great news, I think, for anyone interested in election integrity.
Absolutely. This is so important. And we've been saying, this is basic kindergarten math, that the number of voters who show up to vote or who turn in ballots by mail or however they vote, but the number of voters then must match the number of ballots issued. That'll take into account every kind of ballot, whether it's in person, by mail, provisional, spoiled. All of those matter. All those need to be reconciled. And that is what supports the number of votes that are counted. And that is the Georgia law. But there's no implementation of that by the 159 counties in Georgia. So this election board rule was just adopted just a few minutes ago. And of course, it just implements the state statute, requires reconciliation, just like the bank teller or the grocery store clerk has to reconcile their cash store before they can leave for the day. This would have to be completed before certification. So then when you're certifying, when the board is certifying the election results, they're certifying to the accuracy of those election results. Now, you would think that would be common sense and nobody could oppose it. But you would be wrong, because Mark Elias, all the left-wing groups, all the democracy groups, the ACLU, the American Bar Association, and the chairman of the state election board in Georgia, who's appointed by Brian Kemp, he's against it. He spoke against it. He voted no. He voted with the one Democrat. So it was a 3-2 vote to adopt this common sense rule. And the chairman of the board voted no, John Fervier. And it's really outrageous, but he always votes with the Democrat. Always. He waits to see if she votes no, then he votes with her to make it a 3-2 vote. And he only votes when she votes no. So there are other rules changes to try to make the election process in Georgia conform to the state law, to make sure that there is transparency, that the records of the elections are made available to the public as they're supposed to be, but have never been. And this is how you keep voting machines from being abused and reprogrammed to add ballots or to add votes. Because if you have to have all of these records, you have to have all these procedures, then you can try to protect the integrity of the election.
Cleta, what would happen in the case that one or two of these three sets of headline figures don't align? What's the procedure? What's the process?
Well, the procedure is that it's supposed to be done at the precinct level. And what happens is that if they don't align, then they have to investigate and find out why. It's just like if your cash store doesn't balance, then you have to figure out why doesn't it balance? What is the problem? In 2020, we know that there were 3,000 double-scanned ballots in Fulton County. Well, when you have an election that's separated between Trump and Biden of 11,779 votes, double scanning 3,000 ballots is a big issue. If they had done the reconciliation required by law, that would have been noted right then and there.
Is there a threshold here? When you say they need to do an investigation, if the vote tally is out, by just pick a ridiculous example, but to make the point, if one of these figures is out by only one vote, by what account of one, and you say that there needs to be an investigation, does that mean that the count might not be decided that night? What are the consequences of this?
What the statute provides is that all the other precincts that do reconcile are sent on to the county. And that precinct, it's, like in the Bible, looking for the lost sheep. There are, 10 sheep, one is lost. Jesus goes to look, the shepherd goes to look for the lost sheep. And if they cannot figure out what happened, that is then reported to the supervisor or the county attorney to be able to then say, was there a problem? Is it a pattern? You look into it. And if it's just you can't figure out what happened, then there is the authority to just say, we can't figure out why. It's insignificant. Go ahead and count the ballots. Go ahead and count the votes from that precinct. But it doesn't allow you to just ignore discrepancies and errors. And there is data that shows by a group that came in after the election in 2020, looked at every county in Georgia and found county after county after county where the numbers just did not match. And the statute requires it, but there's been no implementation, and now there will be. But I promise you, the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, ProPublica, they've all done hit pieces against me, against those of us in Election Integrity Network who support these common sense provisions in state after state to require these numbers to match. They didn't match in Pennsylvania, although the law requires it back in 2020. They didn't match in Michigan. They didn't match in Arizona. We have to make these numbers match. The count has to be accurate. We cannot expect people to trust the results if it's not accurate. So that's what this is about.
Okay, so it sounds to me, as you're explaining it, that if there are discrepancies, they won't necessarily obstruct the process of deciding the election victory on the night, but they will need to be formally given a justification saying that this is what the discrepancy is. They have to be officially noted, and they can't be switched under the carpet. Cleta, you're a lawyer. Does this official recognition of the discrepancies, will this aid perhaps the possibility, the opportunities to further legal challenges down the road, even after a result has been formally declared on the night? Can these discrepancies, as they are now going to be duly and officially noted, can they be grounds to take these things further in the courts?
Well, two things in response. First of all, everything you get on election night is an unofficial result. There is an entire week that goes on. Every state is slightly different in terms of how long it is before the unofficial results are canvassed. Canvassing means going back and double recounting to make sure that everything matches. And then, a week later, or in some cases it's 2 weeks later, then that is when the certification takes place. There's always a time period between the unofficial results that we want to get on election night, but that's still only unofficial. And certification doesn't take place until after a period of time where all of these numbers are reviewed to make sure they match. And just remember, the Georgia law requires it. It just has been ignored. And then, but let me tell you what, I was one of President Trump's volunteer attorneys in Georgia after the 2020 election. And I can tell you that we brought an election contest after certification, after the third recount. All the numbers were different. Every time they recounted, the numbers were different. We brought an election contest. We were able to show that there were more irregular votes that had been cast and counted and included in the margin, in the vote totals, than the margin between President Trump and Joe Biden. We never got a judge appointed to hear the case. So people say, well, Trump lost all of his legal battles. Well, he didn't lose ours because there was never a hearing or a trial. But the point is that it's very difficult to overturn an election. It's very difficult to challenge an election. And so you have to have that is a burden. And of course, what the left is saying now is, just don't try to reconcile the numbers. There are problems. Just do it after the election, after it's certified, because they know it can't be done. They do not want the numbers to match. They do not want to be able to document that the election was done correctly. And I can't understand why anybody would oppose these rules unless they wanted to have a process that was not transparent, where they could avoid following the law, and that they didn't want to ensure accuracy in the results. So I'm just glad that the rule passed. The left-wing crazies will no doubt file a lawsuit. I'd like to see them not get a judge appointed for a period of time and just let the clock run. But unfortunately, that only happens to us. It doesn't happen to them. But we'll see what happens. But at the moment, I'm very happy about that.
Cleta Mtchell, thanks very much for giving this debriefing on the Georgia State Election Board this afternoon. We look forward to catching you back on the show in due course. Thanks, Cleta.
More to come.
Great catching up with you. God bless. Joe Hoft, you I know have been one of the leading figures in the election integrity. It's something that you've covered quite a bit on the Joe Hoft show. Good afternoon to you. What you heard that the previous guest, you heard what Cleta was saying about the Georgia Election Board, and what Frank Larose, the Secretary of State in Ohio, was saying about voter integrity heading up to 2024. Do you have any first takes on what you've heard on the show today?
That's great information, and it's great news. And Cleta and her team have been doing a great job. That EIN is really trying to tackle the election integrity along with some other great groups out there since the 2020 election, what I call the steal. I wrote 3 books about it. And so there's other groups out there. United Sovereign Americans are trying to go through some lawfare to try to get these our processes in place so that our elections are fair and transparent, as well as Cause of America, Lindell's group, Cleta's group, our group, which is Fate 2024, which I'm going to talk about here in a moment, and all these other groups that are out there, True the Vote. So many people are working to make this place, this election better. Unfortunately, we've got one hell of a task, and Ben, my background is in corporate audit. I worked for a Fortune 500 firm, did audits around the world, 200-300. I mentioned this trying to offer some credibility to what I'm about to say here. We believe that the 2020 election or 2024 election, the way that we can possibly save it is by protecting the paper, and I'm going to get into that. But where did I come up with this? Well, after auditing basically the 2020 election, what hit me, especially in my second book, was that this election never should have been certified, and therefore it was stolen. Case by case by case, we accepted basically fraud, wrongdoing, shoddy work, and it's something that we would never do in the corporate world. So I worked and I oversaw $1 billion in financials at one time in my career. I've done audits around the world. And I got to tell you, when you are done and you're in a financial audit and you want to make sure everything's clean, you bring in the external auditor to sign off on it. You provide them everything they ask without exception. Internal auditors as well. You give them everything. Every corporation has the employees sign a code of conduct that says you will work with the auditors and give them everything they want. The board, who I've dealt with, many boards around the world, want to know that these numbers are perfect. And that's why they rely on auditors to do this work. The problem in our elections is they're so shoddy, we would never certify them if it were a corporate audit.
We'll be back in just a couple of minutes with Joe Hoft, host of the Joe Hoft Show. Stand by.
In these crazy times, there is peace of mind in security. Security for our country, security for our leaders, and security for our families. But you're not financially secure if all your eggs are in one basket. Gold and silver are an excellent way to diversify your savings. They're a hedge against inflation. With Birch Gold Group, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. Secure your family's savings today. Text Bannon to 989898 and receive a free info kit on gold. Plus, this August only, Birch Gold is giving away free Trump silver coins with any purchase. This brand new one-of-a-kind silver coin features Trump boldly raising his fist in the moments after the attempt on his life. Don't miss your chance to own this special piece of history, a celebration of a leader dedicated to our security, preserved in the security of a precious metals coin. Secure your savings today and get your free Trump silver coins. Text Bannon to 989898 today. That's Bannon to the number 989898. We've seen it time and time again. Somebody exposes the truth just to be labeled a conspiracy theorist, realist, only to be proven right later on. Well, let me tell you about the next thing you should be concerned about. Government geo-tracking of your phone and other devices. We've seen the government use geofencing to track the devices of individuals on January 6th, leading to unwarranted arrests without evidence of wrongdoing. Stop big tech and government overreach. There's no other option. You have to protect yourself. Silent offers an efficient, easy solution to protect your location and personal data. Their Faraday products block all incoming and outgoing signals, so no one can get their hands on your information. Simply place your device inside, close the sleeve, and that's it. You're off the grid, untrackable, and safeguarded from unauthorized access. Go silent today at slnt.com/Bannon to save 15% plus free shipping on qualifying orders. Stay ahead of what's coming and secure your privacy today. Again, that's slnt.com/Bannon for 15% off and free shipping on qualified orders. slnt.com/Bannon. Americans are tired and frustrated by a stalling economy, inflation, endless wars, and the relentless assault on our values. Thankfully, there are companies like Patriot Mobile that still believe in America and our Constitution. They're on the front lines fighting for the First and Second Amendments, sanctity of life, and our military and first responder heroes. Take a stand for conservative causes and put America first by switching to Patriot Mobile today. You'll get the same nationwide coverage as the big providers because Patriot Mobile operates across all 3 major networks. Plus, they back their service with a coverage guarantee. Keep your number, keep your phone, or upgrade. Go to patriotmobile.com/Bannon or call 972-PATRIOT. Right now, get a free month when you use the offer code Bannon. Switch to America's only Christian conservative mobile provider, Patriot Mobile. Go to patriotmobile.com/Bannon or call 972-PATRIOT for your free month of service today.
All this nonsense, all this spin, they can't handle the truth.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War in Harnwell here at the helm. I'm here with Joe Hoft. Joe, I'm looking at this article that's up on joehoft.com right now because you've delineated a strategy which has 3 principal pillars to it, which is guard, validate, and reconcile the ballots. Could you just expand a little bit on this strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And maybe expounding a bit first on my experience in the past doing audits around the world. I was thinking about the other day, I've done audits in communist China, and these people handed me gladly everything that I asked for when I did the audit. Our elections right now are not certifiable because we can't get our hands on all this information. So hat tip to Georgia to move forward and make sure that we can count at least all the ballots before certifying elections. And what we learned in 2020 is if you're not in first, when the accounting's done, then good luck because the courts aren't there for us, nor is this DOJ, et cetera. So this group of professionals I got together, we looked at this as a whole like we would as an audit team, and we said, hey, what are the processes in the election? We came up with around 500 or so controls from these 13 or so key processes and determined that only a third are in place. So we're starting off behind the wheel. This election process in the U.S. is broken. So then we started looking at what are the things we can do. One was voter rolls. And by the way, this individual, Chris Chersky with People's Audit, he's responsible, in my opinion, for cleaning up those voter rolls in Florida, working with a lot of local patriots across the board in multiple counties. He forwarded them reports that showed these individuals that shouldn't be in the voter rolls, and they approached their supervisors of elections and got those removed. So there's some great work around the country. He's doing other states as well right now. And a hat tip to him. So voter rolls is one way. I think Harry Hari and his team with the United Sovereign Americans in challenging the courts to ensure that our elections are free and fair. He's doing that. And we were, okay, what left can we do? And that we landed on this. We need to reconcile every single paper ballot that comes into the system. And Venezuela just did this, if you might recall, Ben, in their recent election. The people that were standing up against the regime there made copies of all these documents in their elections, were able to obtain 80% of those copies and believe based on that alone they won that election. So this is in theory similar to what we're recommending here in the U.S. But the thing is, their elections there are one day and there's no mail-in, so they're all at various precincts. So we put together one report that says here's the things you can do at the local precinct and what you should do on election day, and here's the reconciliations you should perform, and you can work those local supervisors of elections and validate these numbers, and so that everybody's happy. When we're done, it's right. And I think most supervisors of elections in America want to come to the same conclusion, that whether who wins is almost irrelevant. It's that the process is correct. And that's the same attitude I had in running a $1 billion block of business in finance. I didn't care what the results were so much as are they accurate. That was my mandate overseeing those financials. So that's what we have to do here. We put out another paper saying here's what we need to do at these vote by mail centralized centers. And there's various things we need to check there that are different than at the precincts. And as you recall, they're coming in early. We need to reconcile our numbers with the post office. We need to reconcile our numbers with the ballots that are coming in. We need to get our hands around all these. Now, there's 180,000 people, observers, that are willing to help out. We need more. We need people to flood these areas and make sure that a single ballot is not entered into this election that isn't legit. In 2020, we saw vans pull up in Detroit and early in the morning unloading ballots. We had Philadelphia locking us out of a room for 3 days while they manufactured ballots. We had truck drivers bringing ballots across from New York and Pennsylvania. Everything was, it was a free for all, and it never should have been certified. And there isn't a professional auditor with integrity in this world that would have certified that election. I tell you, proof of that is the fact that not one single Big Four firm stepped in and said, we'd like to audit this, because they knew that the results were garbage, and that entity would be threatened by this regime from that day forward. So all the Big Four firms stayed out. We've got to do that ourselves. It's up to us, and we can't count on anybody else. We really can't count on the RNC. They're congratulating themselves for cleaning up voter rolls in Florida, when I believe they had very little to do with that. They've got a good governor and good policies, but the work in cleaning up the voter rolls was local patriots working with the People's Audit, who sent them documents that said these names are not correct. And we could tell that because their names didn't match the postal records, which we know were maintained and up to date every day. So that's the kind of smart stuff we need to do. We need to reconcile everything and not let anything enter this election that's not legit. And when we're done, those ballots need to match the total counts. And Cleta mentioned this before me, and she's right. And that I've actually reached out to their team. They're interested in talking to us about the work that we're doing. So is Cause for America. So are other groups. We need to get together and do this together, and we can win. But I'm telling you, the task is high, because two-thirds of all the controls that should be in place in U.S. elections are not there, because of this whacked out system that we've slowly accepted over time, like the boiling of the water with a frog in it. It's getting hot now.
I just want to underline for the War Room posse, Joe, that your advice, your counsel here on this strategy is built upon your professional advice then as an auditor about making sure the importance of making sure that all these things tie up. That article that I mentioned, I repeat, that's on your website, joehoft.com, sort of pushing the three pillars of guard, validate, and reconcile. Has that strategy is what has been institutionalized, if I might put it that way, within the wider Fate 2024 project?
That's right. And we agree with this. Our effort now is to really push this out, work with some other groups. For example, True the Vote said they have a mechanism built in place where they can get data going back and forth with these local precincts and individual. We could utilize that. There's a lot of work that we can all do together to save this election. It's more than just signing up new voters. We've got to stop the steal. The steal is the fact that they're certifying garbage that never should have been certified ever, and we can't let them do that again. We're all for, if they win legitimately, okay, we move on. But we're not going to do this thing again where they're just going to certify a pile of garbage. That's not the American way. We shouldn't accept that. And quite frankly, that's why we're doing this.
Okay, that's pretty impressive and inspiring, Joe. Just you mentioned your 3 books again. Before you go, would you just kind of run through them, where folks can get hold of them, a bit more about Fate 2024, about if they want to go to the website, a bit about joehoft.com. So many things you're involved with right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. As you know, I've been a contributor to the Gateway Pundit for years with my twin brother Jim, and so you can see some of my articles there. I also have a website now, joehoft.com, where I share articles as well as my shows that are on the Lindell TV, Frank Speech, along with the band, Steve Bannon and the War Room. And then we have this website set up. It's called Fate 2024, where you can go direct to get some of this information related to the 2024 election. We encourage you to go there. See, we've even built templates that you can grab and use for reconciling items in this upcoming election. So that's what we're trying to provide and push to the American people to save this next election.
Joe Hoft, thanks very much for coming on the show. We'll push out your social media stuff and the references that we mentioned on our own warren.org website. Great to have you back on the show soon, I hope, to brief us all on the important progress that you're making. Thanks very much. God bless.
Thanks so much, Ben. Take care.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, so quickly, because we don't have we're moving accelerating towards the end of this hour. Let's bring on now Josh Hammer, the leading opinion editor at Newsweek magazine. Josh, good afternoon to you. There's some big news out today from DC. Obviously caught my eye straight away, considering how successfully the Democrats, when Donald Trump was president, how they blocked 2 years basically of his legislative agenda with their inquiries and their impeachment processes. It now appears not that Joe Biden has 2 years of a legislative agenda left, but it now appears that the Republicans might be in a position, if they wanted to do the same thing back to Joe Biden. What came out of Congress this morning?
Well, Ben, always great to join you. So Congress has now formally, and by Congress I mean House Republicans, have formally concluded after their Congressman Jim Comer inquiry. Comer, of course, being the Oversight Committee chair from Kentucky, and the Republicans on House Oversight had this committee that was looking into the possible filing of impeachment articles against President Joe Biden. So their conclusion, which is brand new as of earlier today, is that Joe Biden did commit impeachable offenses over the course of his career involving his son Hunter Biden, using his influence, especially going back when he was vice president to Barack Obama, when it comes to Hunter Biden's involvement with Burisma and his various other overseas dealings, especially in Romania and China, which, by the way, is actually very relevant for present purposes, given the fact that Hunter Biden's second federal trial, his tax trial, is going to get started here in just the next 3 to 4 weeks or so out in California. And the special counsel in that particular case, David Weiss, actually just introduced in that trial proceeding last week the fact that he is planning to introduce as evidence Hunter Biden taking money from a Romanian oligarch. And then simultaneously, you had a report last week that apparently when Joe Biden was vice president, Hunter Biden was urging people at the U.S. State Department to get Burisma, the Ukrainian company, a contract in Italy. And this was happening literally when Joe Biden was vice president. So, connecting the dots here, that's basically what this report from Congressman Comer and House Oversight Republicans did. And they conclude that Joe Biden did commit impeachable offenses. Now, I do have to give my own 2 cents on this, Ben, which is the fact that this is kind of classic Republican Party tactics, right? And I don't say that necessarily in a good way. I'm obviously a very conservative guy, but I'm never afraid to criticize my own party when I feel they deserve it. I mean, this is what Republicans do time and time and time again. They have something that is potentially catchy, and now they're going to release this report conclusion after the Democrats have already cooed out Joe Biden for Kamala Harris. They're going to release this conclusion during the midst of the August recess when Joe Biden is a total aftermath. I mean, where was this report like a month or 2 ago? So, I mean, the timing is suspect at best. But the conclusion seems correct to me. So, I guess if nothing else, I'm happy that the conclusion is out there. But this unfortunately, Ben, is just the House Republican establishment doing what they do worst, which is just totally botching the timing on this whole ordeal.
Well, there's a very good reason why on my Getter feed, Mike Johnson, Speaker Johnson, is called Speaker No Johnson, because at every single opportunity he seems to be enthusiastic to confirm he doesn't have one. So the report comes out today, and the headline quote is, of course, impeachable conduct. And yet now all eyes are looking on Republican House leadership as you were suggesting, to see what the next steps are. Some people are suggesting, Josh, that Speaker Johnson isn't going to support an impeachment against Joe Biden in the remaining months of this Congress. That would somewhat tie in to what you were suggesting as to why drop it now in the middle of August, right? Perhaps they want to score a couple of points. Perhaps they want to try and steer somewhat the news cycle as the Democrats are just about starting their week-long convention in Chicago. Perhaps that's what that's really the focus between now. So it's just to try and hijack the Democrats' news cycle for a couple of days, rather than do anything substantial about the Biden presidency, which would confirm every criticism the War Room posse would have about the House leadership, that it is totally and only and uniquely performative.
Yeah, I mean, this has all of the optics, Ben, of a classic, Friday late afternoon, early evening, bury the lead sort of news dump. I mean, every so often when you see an administration that is trying to make sure that no one talks about a news story, they will slip it to a media source or issue a formal press release at like 6, 7 p.m. on a Friday late afternoon. This very much feels like that. Look, my own speculation, and it is only that, is speculation. I think that the Republican Party at an institutional level is actually embarrassed by their grassroots supporters and activists' desire to see justice happen to the Biden crime family. I think that the House and Senate Republican establishment, the RNC, basically the whole apparatus, they not only do they not care to actually get justice for Hunter Biden, for Joe Biden, for all this influence peddling, they positively want to kick it to the curb and never see it anymore. They rather talk about their grand old issues when it comes to cutting corporate taxes and neoliberal free trade and neoconservative boondoggles overseas in Russia or Afghanistan, places like that. I mean, they have their priorities. Unfortunately, those priorities are not the priorities of the actual Republican voters, of conservative activists across the country here. And I think that seeing some sort of justice for the Biden crime family, for both Joe Biden and the presidential prodigal son, Hunter Biden, I think that very much fits into that huge chasm between the actual institutional party and the party supporters throughout the base.
It says something to me, Josh, that the Democrats, led by Nancy Pelosi, then Speaker, led an impeachment against Donald Trump on the basis of a phone call that Donald Trump always famously called a perfect phone call with, of all people, Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine. The impeachable material that the House GOP has identified with regard to the Biden family, however, is somewhat more substantial than a telephone call. It's citing that they traced $27 million in payments to Biden family members and their associates from foreign entities based off the fact that at that time Joe Biden was vice president of the United States. This would seem to be really what the Democrats didn't have when they impeached Donald Trump, which is genuine, valid, impeach-worthy material. The question, look, you in a minute, the closing minutes of this chat, Josh, it seems to me that that the Democrats produced far more numbers to impeach Donald Trump than what the Republicans are, if they are to move forward with impeaching Joe Biden. And that says a lot of itself, right? Why, just look, in 30 seconds, can you tell me why are some commentators saying that Mike Johnson doesn't have the numbers for an impeachment when technically he ought to do?
Well, look, Republicans have a very narrow margin in the House, and I don't think it's breaking much news, Ben, to say that not every Republican there in the House, has the spine or has the fortitude of a Chip Roy or Matt Gaetz, someone like that. I mean, you have a lot of weak-kneed Republicans, I think would be an understatement. I mean, that's something of an evergreen statement as well, if I may say so. But you're totally right when it comes to Hunter Biden trying to get this contract for Burisma, trying to pressure U.S. State Department for it, which we learned just a week or two ago back when when Joe Biden was vice president, the Romanian oligarch payoff, which is going to be introduced at trial in California in a few weeks. I mean, to say that this is more serious than the 4.5-5-page transcript of a phone call between Trump and Zelensky in 2019, I mean, it's not even a comparison. It's literally not even a comparison. Unfortunately, as is often the case, the Democratic Party is playing chess while Republicans are simply playing checkers.
Josh Hammer, thanks so much. Stupendous analysis as always. Where do people go to get hold of your outputs on Newsweek?
Yeah, always a pleasure, Ben. Thank you. So I'm on X, Josh_Hammer. Instagram is Josh B. Hammer. Host 2 shows, The Josh Hammer Show and America on Trial with Josh Hammer. You can also follow our work at the Article 3 Project as well.
Brilliant. Josh Hammer, thanks very much for coming on the show. Catch up again with you soon. God bless.
God bless you, Ben.
So in the final moments, we have some news from the founder of this program, Mo Bannon, Captain Bannon. Welcome. Good afternoon. Tell me, you've got a message from your dad, right?
I do, Ben. Thank you for having me on. He's doing just as good today as he was before he went in. He asks about the posse every single day. Most of the emails I get are asking how the posse is doing, how the show's doing, if they love the show. We provide him updates daily on the show and about the posse and the messages that we are getting. So he's very grateful for all the messages that we are sending him. But he wants us to focus on 2 main things going into November. He wants us to focus on getting out the vote efforts and also election workers to stop the steal. So he wants people I get everyone misses him, and we will continue to miss him until he gets out and gets back behind the mic. But he wants us to stay focused on getting America First candidates elected and to get Donald J. Trump back in the White House and a win on November 5th and back in the White House in January in 2025. So if everyone makes sure to get involved and do things, even at the local level, that is all we can do. That's what we can do for my dad.
Captain Bannon, thanks very much for that. And of course, we can always remember Steve in our prayers and pray that the Holy Spirit sustains him in this trial, right? Okay, she's gone. Maureen Bannon, thanks very much. Thank you, Posse. Catch up again with you later on in the week. God bless for now.